One thing I don't hear get talked about a lot or in depth is Payday 3. Now, I decided, you know what? Sure, I'll give it a shot. I'll try to talk about Payday 3 and how awful it is. So, here's my video on why Payday 3 is a steaming hot pile of dog shit. I've given Payday 3 a pretty fair shot, and I genuinely cannot pretend anymore. It is a steaming hot pile of garbage. It is far worse than Payday 2 in almost every way that actually matters. To the gameplay, to the lore, to the soundtrack, to the mechanics, and the overall feel of the game. It lacks what made Payday 2 special. The biggest issue with Payday 3 is how stripped down it feels. In Payday 2, you had an absolutely absurd amount of options. Over 100 weapons, a butt-fuck ton of attachments, mods, and a skill system that actually let you do whatever the fuck you wanted. You could be a absolute tank-ass bitch with the biggest fucking LMG ever, one of the best stealth builds ever, fucking akimbo dodge, and sprinting through shit like you're the dude from the fucking Matrix. Now, Payday 3, that shit was bare bones. You had limited weapons, you had barely fucking any attachments, a skill tree that feels like a joke, and a progression system so goddamn slow, it makes grinding feel fucking mandatory. I mean, it is, but you get my point. Even something as basic as offline play is gone, because they decided to make it always online for no particular fucking reason. The result? A game that doesn't respect your time or your fucking choices. One of the things that kept me pretty hooked on Payday 2 for so long was the lore. It started as a simple heist game, I thought it was pretty nice, but over time, it turned into this really big, layered story involving a bunch of secret shit. You had the dentist, you had murky water, and you had the secret ending. It added a lot of intrigue, if you ask me. People were decoding secret fucking languages, hunting for God knows what, and putting shit together. Payday 3, it's like an afterthought, okay? The characters barely interact in any meaningful way. The world feels empty, and fucking worst of all, doesn't even acknowledge the lore that Payday 2 had built up. Let's talk about Payday 2's soundtrack for a second. You hear Razormind, you hear Evil Eye, you're like, oh wow, yeah, that's Payday 2, that's iconic as shit. The music was, I'd say a word for it, aggressive, chaotic. It fit perfectly, alright? It fit the vibe of a heist gone loud, it felt distinct. Every song, every soundtrack felt distinct. Like it belonged to the heist itself. Payday 3's soundtrack is so fucking forgettable that it's just background noise. It doesn't add tension. It doesn't do shit. It doesn't make you, it doesn't put you in the game. It doesn't make you feel like you're in control of what you're playing. It's missing that energy that made Payday 2 so immersive. Look, I get Payday 2 had a butt-fuck ton of DLCs. But at least you could buy what you wanted and still have a complete game without it. The game was balanced so that paid content wasn't necessary to have fun, but it was still nice to have. Payday 3 is built around engagement metrics, slower progression, grindy unlocks, and the looming threat of live service microtransactions. Collaborations were a pretty big part of Payday 2. Some notable ones like Hotline Miami and Goat Simulator, also Scarface, were pretty big and also made me want to play the game. One of them being the Hardcore Henry one. It was a free DLC given out to almost everybody, and at the time was one of my favorite movies. So obviously, I ran Jimmy for almost 3 months until I found out about Hotline Miami. Now, I doubt Payday 3 will ever have something as big as that, ever. Which is a little disappointing. And one of the only good aspects of the DLCs that came from Payday 2. When Payday 2 was at its peak, it had over 70 heists. And not just filler missions like 4 stores or fucking nightclub. Each heist had different approaches, stealth routes, and randomized elements. You could run the same heist 20 times and still find a new way to play it. Payday 3 launched with fucking 8. 8! And they're not that bad, right? But they're gonna get stale fast, okay? With no mods, no offline mode, and no major updates adding content regularly, there's no reason to stick around. And let's not forget how Payday 2 had mutators, community challenges, and a player-driven ecosystem of mods that kept the game alive for a decade. Payday 3 kills that by locking everything behind servers and live service nonsense. At the end of the day, Payday 3 just is not worth it. Not in its current state, at least. Maybe a few years, months down the line, with enough updates and, content drops, it could turn into something worthwhile, but as it stands, it's nothing compared to Payday 2. Where Payday 2 gave players freedom, depth, and near endless replayability, Payday 3 feels like a step backwards. The lack of content, the restrictive always online requirement, the uninspired progression, it all adds up to the experience that feels frustrating rather than rewarding. When you compare the energy, the personality of Payday 2's soundtrack, the world building, the mechanics, it's clear why people still keep coming back to Payday 2. And it's not even just the nostalgia. Payday 2 is simply more complete and more engaging. If you're looking for a definitive heist experience, there's no contest. Stick with Payday 2. At least until Payday 3 proves it can actually deliver. So if you're debating which game, stick with Payday 2. It's not even close.